The air conditioning failed at 11:17 on a Tuesday night, which mattered because old magnetic tape does not like heat. Neither did my back. I'd already moved 14 evidence totes to the conversion room when Hollis brought me the gray cart. One wheel had a flat spot, so it knocked against the floor every few feet. He left a transfer manifest beside my keyboard and told me the material had to be digitized before morning. There were 11 boxes on the cart. The manifest listed 12. I pointed that out before I read the case number. Hollis told me to count again. I did. 11 boxes, all sealed with brittle evidence tape, opened and resealed so many times. The cardboard had peeled away in layers. The oldest labels were handwritten. The newer ones had barcodes pasted over the handwriting. I told him one was missing. He drew a line through the 12, wrote 11 above it, and pushed the paper back. Reconciled, he said. That was how we handled discrepancies in that building. 2 years earlier, I had reported a missing envelope from a narcotics case. Followed procedure exactly. The envelope turned up 3 days later in a lieutenant's desk. Nothing happened to the lieutenant. I received a written warning for interrupting evidence access without authorization. And Hollis reminded me of it whenever I noticed something he preferred not to notice. So when people ask why I never called the police, that is the first answer. The material was already inside a police evidence facility. The people telling me to change the records worked for the police. And before that night was over, I would possess a restricted recording I had no legal right to copy. The first crime anyone could prove would have been mine. I signed the revised manifest. Hollis left without helping me unload. The first box held vehicle diagrams, interview summaries, photographs in cloudy plastic sleeves. The second, travel receipts. The third, micro cassettes in individual bags marked with dates and interviewers' initials. One bag had a dead spider sealed inside it. I remember that more clearly than most of the names. I spent several minutes deciding whether it counted as foreign material, noted it, and moved on. That was the job. Not whether a statement was true. Not whether the people on a recording were guilty, frightened, lying, or dead. Confirm the object exists, describe its condition, copy it without changing it. The case number belonged to the investigation into Tupac Shakur's killing. We didn't call it that in the annex. Celebrity cases went by number because names made people curious, and curiosity was an evidence handling risk. The note on the cart said the cassettes were deteriorating and had to be preserved before the department moved to a new record system. Digitize the audio, flag only technical defects, hiss, dropout, tape drag, nothing about content. For almost an hour, nothing surprised me. Room noise. Questions asked twice. Men trying to remember the order of things from years earlier. One interview concerned a white Cadillac, another a confrontation after a boxing match. On a later cassette, investigators pressed a man about an alleged offer of money connected to Shakur. He didn't describe it the same way twice. I'm not saying that proved he was lying. A cassette preserves hesitation as faithfully as fact. It keeps bad memory, fear, and whatever a person thinks the listener wants to hear. Sometimes it keeps the recorder's mistakes too. At 12:46, I opened a cassette case with a pale circular mark around the left spool, the size of a soda can's bottom. I assumed a spilled drink. Half the paper in that building smelled like old coffee. I logged possible liquid exposure and loaded the tape. 6 seconds of hiss. A chair scraped. Someone cleared his throat. Then an investigator asked about a trip to New York, a failed attempt to reconnect with a sick intermediary who'd passed the man off to a nephew. The throat clearing came back, right before a question about the money. The third time, I noticed the chair scrape came with it. Throat, chair, a short breath through the nose, then an answer. I marked it as a recording artifact and continued. In the expense box, a faded hotel loyalty sticker clung to the back of a receipt. A room code and partial date still visible. I almost threw it away. Instead, I sleeved it, because removing anything counted as alteration. Then I compared barcodes against the manifest. The missing box belonged between two boxes already on the cart and carried a destruction code, destroyed years ago. But someone had scanned that box into the annex at 6:12 that evening, 3 hours before Hollis changed 12 to 11. I was still staring at the timestamp when the desk phone rang. No caller ID 4 zeros. I answered, silence. Then a throat clear, a chair scrape, a short breath through the nose. The line went dead. I kept the receiver against my ear after the line went dead. The air conditioner had stopped completely. Without it, I could hear the fluorescent fixtures buzzing and the conversion deck turning at my elbow. Throat, chair, breath. The sounds had come through the telephone in the same order as the tape. That is how I remember it. I need to be careful saying that, because the call lasted 5 seconds, the cassette was still playing, and the sound might have carried from my headphones. I have told this part differently before. The only thing I know for certain is that the phone rang at 1:38 in the morning, and the internal log later showed no incoming call. I should have reported it to Hollis. Instead, I walked the corridor. The annex was a converted warehouse, dark at night, motion sensors on the lights. Each section lit as I reached it and went black 12 seconds behind me. Hollis's office was empty. Desk lamp off, screensaver drifting, a capped bottle of orange soda beside his keyboard. Break room, restrooms, loading vestibule, nobody. The access panel at the evidence cage showed 2 employees inside the building, Hollis and me. His badge had never left. I called his extension and listened to it ring inside his empty office until his voicemail answered in his voice. Walking back, the motion light above aisle C came on ahead of me, stayed lit, went dark, then came on again. And I heard the flat wheel of the gray cart knock once against the floor. I returned to the conversion room fast enough to embarrass myself. The cart hadn't moved. All 11 boxes were where I'd left them. I locked the door anyway. Then I did the part of the job nobody puts on television. I pulled the missing box's barcode history. 16 recorded movements. The first entries were normal. Then the dates began overlapping. Checked out to an interview room while still logged inside the cage. Transferred off site without being returned. Accessed on a Sunday, the annex was closed for a plumbing failure. Returned from a forensic audio contractor it was never sent to. Then the destruction code, water contamination. Water damage tape isn't just thrown away. There should have been photographs, a damage assessment, 2 signatures. There was only the code and 1 set of initials, Hollis's. I printed the history, 3 pages queued, 4 printed. The 4th sheet was blank, except for a barcode, the missing box, and a location code I had never seen, C-0. The cage ran A through M, shelves starting at 1, no shelf 0. But an older floor map in the emergency binder showed that before the remodel, aisle C had extended farther north, ending in a refrigerated evidence locker, removed years ago. Its old location had been covered with drywall. Through the safety window, the light above aisle C was on. It did not go out. I called Hollis's mobile. Traffic behind him. He said he was home. I told him the system showed his badge inside the building. A long pause, then, "What did you find?" Not whether I was safe, what I had found. When I mentioned his initials on the destruction record, he said, "You're there to convert tape, not reopen a homicide. Correct the count and finish the cart." He hung up. The panel still showed his badge inside. I should have left. But Hollis had asked what I found before I told him anything was wrong. I wanted to know what he already knew. My badge should not have opened the cage. The light turned green anyway. I followed the markers to the end of aisle C, lights waking one at a time. The shelving stopped short of the northern wall. The drywall there was blistered near the floor, a vertical seam running baseboard to ceiling. I pressed my palm against it. Refrigerated cool. Scratched through the paint. The bottom half of a rectangle, the size of a door. 3 soft knocks from behind the wall, plastic against metal. Then a motor. A dry dragging noise. A click. A cassette reaching the end of its tape. I jolted back into the shelving, and a dislodged strip of evidence tape revealed a second hotel loyalty sticker under an archive box. Same chain, same room code, and a date, 2 days earlier than the arrival date on the police travel paperwork. The mechanism behind the wall reset. A man spoke, muffled. Let's take it again. A throat cleared. A chair scraped. One breath through the nose. Then he gave the same answer playing on the stained cassette in the conversion room. Not similar. The same pauses. The same damaged syllable. Behind a freshly screwed baseboard panel, I found a broken evidence seal and a cable running up inside the wall, tagged with a laminated barcode, the destroyed box's number. The recording stopped. The conversion room phone began ringing at the far end of the building. Hollis was on the line. No traffic now. Very quiet. Did you open the wall? I don't know what you mean. There were never 12 boxes. Behind me, the gray cart knocked once. 12 boxes. I did not touch the 12th box that night. I want that on the record, because everything the department later said about me starts with the claim that I opened it immediately. I photographed it with my phone. 4 pictures. The wet cardboard. The barcode. My employee number and marker that had bled into the damp surface. The bottom of the stack where the water had spread into a shape like a hand opening. Then I sat down at the conversion deck because sitting down was the only normal thing left in the room. Hollis had hung up. The access panel now showed one badge inside the building. Mine. Here's the part I have never explained well. I stayed. It was 2:40 in the morning. There was a box on my cart that had come from nowhere with my number written on it, and I stayed another 3 hours. My wife asked me later why. The honest answer is the worst one. The shift log would show I left early. I had a written warning in my file, and I was more afraid of Hollis's paperwork than of whatever had put that box on the cart. Fear of the wrong thing. That was my specialty. So I worked. I went back to the stained cassette because the voice behind the wall had spoken its answers word for word, and I needed to know whether the tape or my memory was lying. Under the magnifier lamp, I looked properly at the pale ring around the left spool for the first time. It was not a drink stain, liquid leaves, tide marks. This ring sat on the surface with a slight shine at its edge, and it dragged against my glove. Adhesive residue. Someone had opened the cassette shell. The ring was where a stabilizing disc had been pressed around the spool during work. Clerks are not supposed to open cassette shells. I opened it. The screws were not original. Flat instead of domed. One cross-threaded, the way a screw gets when it's driven back in by someone in a hurry. Inside, I found the splice. Cut and rejoin magnetic tape shows a hairline diagonal seam. A professional splice is almost invisible. This one was professional. What gave it away was the color. A section roughly 9 inches long sat between 2 seams, darker than the tape on either side. Different batch, different age. 9 inches at cassette speed is about 5 seconds of audio. 5 seconds had been cut out of a homicide interview and replaced with 5 seconds from somewhere else. I hand wound the splice to the playhead and played it. Throat, chair, breath. The splice was the throat clear. I played it 4 times. Then I did the thing that ended my career. The deck had a monitoring jack on the front panel. I plugged in my personal recorder and made a copy. No log, no stamp, no authorization. I told myself it was preservation. My real reason was the voice behind the drywall saying, "Let's take it again." Over the next 4 nights at my kitchen table, I isolated every throat clear on the interview. There were 11. 7 were ordinary, different lengths, different pitch. 4 were identical. Same duration to the millisecond, same waveform. And under each one, the room tone dropped out and was replaced by a slightly different hiss, then returned. 4 times, someone had pasted the same 5 seconds into the recording. Each of the 4 sat immediately before an answer about the money. I cannot tell you what the original answers were. I never heard what was underneath. What I can tell you is the mechanics. Somebody with access, skill, and time had rebuilt 4 answers in a recorded homicide interview and resealed the cassette with the wrong screws. And the seam they used was a throat clear, a chair, a breath. The same 3 sounds that came through my telephone at 1:38 in the morning. On the 5th night, I compared my photographs of the 2 hotel stickers. Same chain, same room code. The sticker's printed date was 2 days before the arrival date on the law enforcement travel paperwork. Someone had been in that hotel room before the paperwork said anyone arrived. The guest name was blacked out. I never saw a name. On the 6th night, I planned to open the 12th box, log it into existence so officially that nobody could disappear it again. I never got the chance. At 10:58, Hollis was waiting at the conversion room door with a woman from Professional Standards. The cart was gone. On the desk sat my personal recorder in an evidence bag, sealed, tagged, and logged. I had left it at home that morning, in a locked drawer, under the waveform printouts. The seal was signed and dated. The date was 2 days before I made the copy. Approximately 780 words, splice, 4 identical throat clears, sticker date, and the impossible evidence bag ending all. The woman from Professional Standards was named Okafor, and she was the only person in this entire story who was polite to me. She sat me in the break room because the annex had no interview room of its own. A detail that still strikes me as funny in a way I cannot explain to anyone who has not been interrogated next to a vending machine. She asked whether the recorder was mine. It was. Serial number, scratch on the battery door, my thumbprint worn into the record button. She asked when I had last had it in my possession. That morning, in my kitchen, in a locked drawer. She wrote that down without changing her face, then slid the evidence bag across the table so I could read the intake tag. And I understood my answer had just become the least believable sentence spoken in that building all year. The tag said the recorder had been logged into evidence 2 days before the night I made the copy. I want to be precise about what that means. Either the tag was falsified, someone backdated an evidence intake, a felony, to catch a clerk making a copy they could not yet have known about, or the tag was accurate. I do not have a third option. I have stress tested my memory against shift logs, phone photographs, my wife's memory. The dates hold. I made the copy on the 14th. The tag said the 16th of the month before. Okafor asked if I wanted to explain the audio files on the device. She played 30 seconds through a tinny break room speaker. It was my copy, but I had my copy. at home, backed up to a drive hidden inside a box of Christmas decorations, because by night 5, I had become that kind of person. There were 2 copies of a recording I made once. I invoked my right to a representative, went home on leave, and listened to my copy, the one my hands made, front to back, one more time. That is when I found the second voice. It sits at the 11-minute mark during 40 seconds of dead air while the interviewers shuffle paper. On the official digitized version, that stretch is just room tone. On my copy, at 11 minutes and 4 seconds, a voice speaks off mic. Low, male. Not the subject, not either interviewer. Under the noise floor, the way a voice sounds through a wall, 5 syllables, an evidence box number, the destroyed box, the 12th box, the number on the laminated tag inside the wall at the end of aisle C. The interview was recorded in 2009. The box was logged destroyed in 2003, and the number is spoken on the tape 21 minutes before an interviewer says it aloud for the first time in the official transcript. That is why the number had sounded familiar from the first night. I had heard it before I ever read it. It had always been on the tape, just not on the version anyone was supposed to hear. I have no theory I am willing to say out loud. Every option requires either a machine that records things before they happen, or a person who spent 17 years maintaining 2 parallel versions of a homicide file and who let a night clerk copy the wrong one. I don't know which frightens me more. Here's what it cost in order. My certification, unauthorized duplication, proven because I had done it. The splice, the throat clears, the sticker, the wall, never examined. They fired the witness and the testimony went with him. That is how it is designed to work. The pension went with the certification. My wife went 11 months later. She told me she could live with a man who was fired. She could not live with a man who kept re-listening. It was the right word. The interview subject went to trial in front of the whole world. Testimony about money offered, money that never arrived, a dying man in an ambulance saying words to the effect of, "We'll take care of it." I never learned who was in the hotel room 2 days early. I never put a name on the second voice. Both doors are still open. I have stopped standing in front of them. The drive is in a safety deposit box 2 states away under a name that is not mine. Last visit, I listened to the 40 seconds one more time. Paper, hiss, the voice. And underneath, new or never caught before, and I am past pretending I know the difference. A spool turning, a tape recording the sound of a tape. I slid the drive back into the wall. On the metal door, above the keyhole, was a pale circular mark, the exact width of a thumbprint.